I'm very glad on this episode to be talking to Yusuke Hyogo. He's here in Calgary and he's an immigration consultant. And I'm very interested in learning more about how he came to be in Calgary and what he thinks of the city and more about his experiences here. So, Yusuke, could you please tell me how long you've been in Calgary?
I have been in Calgary for probably 14, 15 years. I kind of lost track of it, but it's been at least like 14 years.
And what first brought you to Calgary?
Education. So I was in Lethbridge before I came to Calgary. I was studying at college and I graduated college and I was looking for some changes. And I was kind of sick of windy weather there. So I was like, why not Calgary? So I just decided to
You're
move
saying it's
here.
very windy there.
I bet it still is.
Yes,
But like the windy weather, but I was not quite used to, and it feels like much colder when it's windy. It's I'm
absolutely.
I'm I'm
Yeah.
used to cold weather, but like the wind was like kind of hard to take it. And I also wanted experience some different city in Canada and
Right.
being the same in province, but just a little bit bigger. Calgary seemed to me was a good option that time.
Right.
So
Right.
um this British College and this University of Calgary has good transferring system for education. So
Right.
whatever the courses I took in Lethbridge College, now it's called yeah, it used to be Lethbridge Community College, but now it's Lethbridge College. I could transfer all the credit to University of Calgary. So
And what were you studying at Lethbridge College?
I was taking English literature.
What was your level of English at that point before you came to study? It must have been very high, at least on the reading level.
You'd assume, but I don't think I was quite high. Like I came here right after I graduated from high school in Japan, and at that point I spoke zero English. I didn't even understand a word of what people say to me. It was too fast to comprehend. But like I took ESL for probably 8 months or so. So
Right.
I built foundation and I was accepted to college, but like every day was struggle. I had to read a lot of books and articles every day. But my English professor was very helpful. He encouraged me to study English and he helped me a lot of ways to write assignments and understand what he meant in lectures and stuff. So I
Mm-hmm.
got really interested in English literature because of him. So even though I was struggling uh, to keep up with the class, I kind of kept going.
Right. And they always say that the best way to learn, of course, is to immerse yourself in the language and speak that foreign language as much as possible and not speak your native tongue. Did you know other Japanese people and Japanese speakers? Or were you forced to use English because you didn't have Japanese classmates?
Actually, like Lethbridge, considering how small it is,
Hmm.
there are a lot of Japanese people. Well, like it was like I think there was some exchange program I didn't know at that time.
Yeah.
But every year, like 20, 30 Japanese students are coming to Lethbridge College.
Okay.
So there are a lot of, I think there still are a lot of Japanese students, and there were quite a few when I was there.
Yeah.
So I wasn't necessarily forced to speak English only. I had some friends who spoke Japanese, but in class, I was
Yes.
speaking English and everything I was reading and writing had to be English.
Right.
So
Right.
there's a little bit of combination of both.
Right. And what were some of your favorite authors?
Oh, that's a good question. Joseph Boyden, I think he's a Canadian author.
Oh, okay. He was one of your favorites, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. At least like that's why I came. That kind of came to my mind right now. And I would say Ernest Hemingway is
Hmm.
one of my favorites too.
Now, regarding Joseph Boyan, what about his writing attracted you? What did you like about it?
I liked his like view of native like indigenous people
Hmm.
and how they survived in Canada in a way. They were obviously experienced certain circumstances, but I think the way he describes their strengths and how they kind of overcome that period of time kind of inspired me how I survived in Canada too. It's obviously
Mm.
different experience, but I could kind of like see myself how I struggle in Canada in a different culture,
Yeah.
and I can kind of see how he described people in the changes in the culture and languages in Canada too.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah. And how about with Hemingway? Now, he's very famous, of course, for his very spare writing style,
Mm,
where very few words say a lot. He's not a wordy writer, right? He uses a
no.
few words that really resonate. And it almost, and forgive me if this is too much of a stretch, but it almost reminds me of the Japanese, writing with the haikus, where you
Hmm.
try to say so much that evokes so much imagery, but with very few words. Do you see
Right.
some connection there?
I now you say that, maybe that's why I like it.
Hmm.
I didn't really realize that, but I think the reason why I like his literature is that he doesn't say much, but it gives you room to kind of explore what's behind the words.
Yes. Yes.
And maybe that's resonating with my background
Right.
as a
Yeah,
Japanese.
maybe. Yeah, I don't know. I just that's what first came to my mind when I thought of that when you said that.
Yeah, that's a
Um,
good perspective.
Now, you've told me in the past because we've met a couple times before that you're from Hokkaido. Can you tell me a little bit about what it was like to grow up there and how different it is here?
Hokkaido, in a way, is quite similar to Calgary. Well, I guess depends which city you're from in Hokkaido too. But I'm from Obihiro, which is the smaller side of Hokkaido, I guess. Like Sapporo is one of the most famous city in Hokkaido. And I grew up in the mountains and I was pretty close to mountains. If you drive like 30, 40 minutes, I was able to get out to mountains. So
Mm-hmm.
in a way, that was pretty similar. Like growing up, I was used to have a cold winter, like very snowy, cold weather. So I enjoy skiing and like kind of winter sports like skating and stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
So it is the same, but obviously culture, like just because I'm growing up in a small city, I've never really seen anyone who doesn't speak Japanese or who has like different cultural backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
That is quite different. Obviously, like English is not my first language, and I didn't know anything about it until I came here. Like I did study English in junior high and high school, but
Mm-hmm.
that is basically from the textbook, and I didn't really know how to use it. I didn't know how to communicate in English and how to use that word in a sentence, right? So that is totally different. And the people, just because where I'm from, people are kind of used to have the same, I guess, norm and the cultural background.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really meet people from like all over the place until I came to Canada. So meeting people who have totally different background, different values, different regions, speak different languages, that was an adjustment for me.
I'm sure, yeah. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, of course, but Hokkaido is the northern edge of Japan, or the northern side, right? Northern
That's
end.
right.
And so that's why it's a little bit cooler and can
Mhm.
get snow and stuff, because a lot of Japan you don't really get snow except in the highest elevations like around Mount Fuji and so on.
Right.
Okay. And did you know that about this area? Like, did you know much about how close we were to the mountains, and that was that part of what drew you to this area, the Western Canada?
Yes. So I want to ski in Canada. I want to ski in the Rocky Mountains.
Yeah.
So like I researched like where can I ski in Canada?
Mm.
So that's
Yeah.
pretty much all I knew actually. I didn't really
Yeah.
know anything.
So that was a big factor then. These wonderful ski resorts we have here was a big factor in choosing to be so like an hour away or a little over an hour if you're in Lethbridge.
Yes, it was.
Okay, very, very cool. As I've mentioned to you before, so I was lucky enough to spend nearly a year in Japan, in Tokyo, teaching English in my early 20s, and I was struck by just how gracious and how welcoming Japanese people were, and how proud they were of their country, and how important it was that anyone who was visiting felt happy there, just felt welcome. Did you feel welcomed here? And do you think, is there a contrast there? Like, how does someone feel accepted here? And what was that like at first?
I think I was I was like when I was new here, like when I
Mm.
came here, I didn't speak English well. Like I didn't really know what people were saying. I didn't know how I can say what I was hoping to say.
Mm.
But people are still welcoming. They try to communicate with me. they try to like understand. They try really hard to
Mm,
understand what I was trying to say. They were very patient. And even though they didn't understand what I was saying, they tried to kind of like figure it out what I was
mm,
trying to say and like trying to kind of like keep the conversation going.
mm-hmm,
And I did experience kind of welcomeness first 2, 3 months I arrived here because like everyone was just trying to talk to me and everyone just tried to understand why I'm here and what I want to do here. And no one said a thing about what I was like. No one actually criticizes me for what I was doing and why I came here. So I didn't really think that that would be a reaction because
mm-hmm,
I just graduated high school and I had no idea what I was doing. Like
mm,
like I didn't know anything. Like, but people still like very welcoming. They encouraged me how I can kind of survive there. They're like, oh yeah, like let me know if you need anything. Like I'll help you. But like I didn't even know what I was doing.
right.
But they still try to like help me. It seems like they kind of sympathize the struggle like I was having, just like having a few minutes conversation.
Right.
That's how much I was struggle
Right. Right.
to just have like no more conversation.
Right. Well, when I did spend that nearly a year in Japan in my early 20s, I went with my girlfriend, and it was her first time being away from her family, first time being outside the country, whereas I had traveled many times to Europe as a child, to Slovakia, especially where my father's from. So I was used to being far from home, whereas she wasn't. And she got very homesick after a few months, really kind of depressed, just missing her family and miss just being in such a different culture. Did you experience some of that homesickness, or did you have previous travels? Were you already comfortable being far from home?
I wasn't actually. I didn't. I lived entire my life with my family, so I was that was first time being away from my family, like my parents, my sister and brother. So I did experience a little bit of homesick, but I think mine was not severe. I was very excited to experience new things in Canada. I was trying to study hard, so like my focus was more like studying.
Mhm.
So I didn't really feel homesick as much. Like when I
Mhm.
talked to my parents over the phone or Skype, I did feel like, oh, I mean, I want to go back to Japan. Like, I didn't necessarily feel depressed or anything like that.
Mhm.
And I think host family I was staying with was very helpful and they were very welcoming.
Mhm.
So they treated me as like one of their family members,
Mhm.
and that helped me quite a bit too. Because like I kind of felt like I was being a part of the family, even
Mm.
though I was away from my real family, if it
Yes.
makes sense.
Yes, of course. Yeah. Yeah.
So I did experience some like homesick, but not terrible
Oh, good,
compared to
good.
some people.
And as you mentioned, the outdoor activities, especially in the mountains, are what drew you to this area. So, what are some of the outdoor activities you've engaged in the last 15 years since that you've been here?
Certainly skiing. Well, skiing
Mhm.
was like one of the main reasons I decided to come into Alberta.
Yeah.
And after a year or two I spent in Lethbridge, I started climbing. I've been climbing quite a bit, or like in Rocky Mountains. There are a lot of places I can go climbing with, and also like hiking. I go hiking with my friends and stuff every once in a while.
Yep.
So like skiing, hiking, climbing, I think those are the main outdoor activities I've been doing during summer.
Right. And in the winter, where do you like to go skiing the best?
It depends on the condition. I go backcountry skiing and I also go to resort like Sunshine and Lake Louise and stuff too. But I go backcountry, so like I basically hike up to where I want to ski and then ski down. And it just depends on the avalanche conditions. If snow seems to be stable, I go somewhere like further, go Highway 93 north, and if sometimes it's not, then go somewhere closer like Kananaskis.
Okay. And just so I understand, so you don't go to the ski resort like Sunshine and then go off the trails there so much. Is that you don't do that? You're more going to the Kananaskis area, like where there's the trails.
Backcountry skiing. So it's kind of similar
Okay.
to telemark skiing.
Telemark skiing. That's the word I
Yeah,
was looking
you
for. Yeah.
use skin, which gives you a friction, so you can climb up the hill,
Right.
and then you
I
ski
see.
down where you climb up.
I see. But you can also, so can cross country ski with those skis, and then when you get to a slope, you can go up it and then down. Is that correct?
Yeah, similar to, yes.
Okay. So you can go over level ground for a fair distance on those then?
Right, yeah, you gain quite a bit elevation sometimes. Depends on
I
your
see.
objective, I guess.
I see. I see. But when you're going to a resort like Sunshine or Lake Louise, then you're using normal downhill skis?
Right, yeah,
Oh, okay. I mean, I've certainly done plenty of downhill skiing, and when I was growing up in Canmore, we did cross country skiing in
right.
phys ed. And my first, I was very lucky because growing up in Canmore, we had as part of our gym class, we got to sign up to go get ski lessons at Mount Norquay. So they'd
Oh
pack us
wow.
all into a bus, take us out to Mount Norquay to learn how to ski. So that's an advantage of
Hmm.
growing up in the mountains.
For sure, yeah.
Have you ever had a chance to go heli skiing?
No, that's on my bucket list.
I bet. Yeah, it's
Everyone's bucket list, isn't it?
pretty much. It's very expensive. I was very fortunate when I was in junior high. I guess I was in grade 9. I joined the Banff and Canmore Air Cadets, and our captain was friends with the man who owned a heli skiing company. And they took us all in a bus one weekend, and we stayed 2 nights at this. It was Mike Wigley heli skiing. They took
Oh,
us
wow,
to
nice.
that where they have their cabins and took us up a couple of times in the helicopter for heli skiing, and just an amazing experience. I'm here in grade 9 and getting to have a free weekend with my friends doing heli skiing. It was amazing, and certainly not something that I could have or my family could have afforded at the time.
Yeah, that would be a good treat for sure.
Yeah, it was beautiful because they take you up to the mountain peak, and as you can imagine, it's once the helicopter's gone, it's super quiet. And then they have a guide that says, "You better stay on my tracks. In certain parts, you better stay right behind me because there could be a crevice, a hidden crevice, and you could fall, and that could be the end, right?" So
Hmm.
you would be so nervous, staying on my tracks, stay on my tracks, and then you're picking up speed, and you're like, "Oh no." But it was amazing, a beautiful soft
Yeah, I
powder, and
bet.
yeah, I hope you get to have that experience soon. That'd be amazing.
Someday.
Absolutely, yeah. So, how about the rest of like other parts of Canada have you visited? How much of Western Canada have you been to?
Just like a little bit in Vancouver, I spent a little bit time climbing in Squamish. So just like north of Vancouver, I
Hmm.
visited Kelowna and it's Penticton. There are a lot of good climbing there too.
Right.
That's pretty much it. I've never really traveled to east, just like west side, close to Vancouver and Kelowna.
Hmm. Hmm. Since coming to Calgary, other than being less windy, how did it compare to Lethbridge, and what ways did you connect with other people? How easy did you find it to connect with other people here in Calgary?
Well, first I was here for school, so like
Yeah.
University of Calgary and students there were very welcoming. And I
Hmm.
think climbing helped me in a lot of ways. I was able to be part of the community member. So there's a climbing community and just constantly climbing. I was climbing like 6 days a week, maybe 3 hours a day. And I get to know a lot of climbers in Calgary.
So you're going to the
So
climbing walls at the U of C and elsewhere in Calgary?
right, yeah.
Okay.
So I was just like constantly climbing and just like going back forth, climbing walls, and that helped me get myself settled in Calgary because I get to know a lot of people and I get to know people in a different way I did in Lethbridge because like Lethbridge, I think people in a way expected I was there for temporary.
Hmm.
But here, like I was like kind of like I started working here after I graduated too, and people seem to kind of think that like, oh, this person is gonna be here forever, and I was able to kind of connect with them like a little bit further. So I get to hang out with them, like I get to go visit their houses sometimes. I get to go climbing or skiing with them. So I get to spend a little bit more time outside of school or outside of work.
Hmm.
So I was being able to kind of settle in a way. Like I had a sense that I was in the community, I belonged to that community, and I was part of the member of that community. That sense of belonging definitely made me feel more comfortable living in Calgary.
Nice, yeah. Have you had some chances to go back? Have you gone back to Japan in the last 15 years?
Yes. Well, not last 4 years because of COVID, but usually I go back every 2 years or so
Okay.
to see my family and friends.
And what stands out to you when you do that? Because whenever I'm away from Calgary for more than a few weeks, I'm always struck by the wide open spaces, how big the sky seems, and how wide the roads are compared to Europe. So when you go to Japan and then come back, what stands out to you as different here?
So when I go back to Japan, like everything is so close. Like
Yeah.
obviously Japan is a much smaller country than Canada,
Yes.
so everything's kind of tight together. Like how much, if you think about it, like if you just walk like a block in Japan and block in Canada, I realize how much walking I'm doing in Canada than compared to
Hmm.
like Japan.
Hmm.
Like I walk much less to get to like let's say a superstore,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So like I realized how big Canada is when I go back to Japan, and everything is so much closer in Japan, and that kind of gives me the sense that how convenient it is in Japan.
Hmm.
Like if you walk a block, you see a convenience store, and the convenience store has like everything.
Yes.
Not that I think it's the best. Like I can live without it. I don't necessarily think that that's something I really need. But when you go back to Japan, like I kind of feel like, oh, I'm so spoiled. Like it's everything is there in just like matter of like 5 minutes walk.
Yeah, and then yeah, you come back here, and then suddenly you have all this personal space. You have this wide
Hmm.
open roads, and but also you need a vehicle because everything's so far apart, like everything's so distant. Whereas
Right,
in Japan, I know at least in Tokyo, where I was, very few people have vehicles because you don't. Why would you need it? There's excellent
right.
transportation,
Hmm.
and it would take a long time to drive anywhere within the city because the roads are narrow and busy, and
Hmm.
it's much better to walk and then take a train to get anywhere. Whereas here, if you don't have a car, you're traveling a long time on transit, and it's tough.
Yes,
It's very difficult to get around without a vehicle here,
that's true. Yeah.
and a lot more personal space here. I remember taking the train into my job in Tokyo and being packed in so tightly in the train that I couldn't have turned around if I'd wanted to because you're pressed like a sardine against everyone else.
Right.
Um,
And I noticed like
yeah,
how busy it is, like how many people in Japan too, in such a small space.
yes.
Like especially in Tokyo, I grew up in like urban side of like Japan and in Hokkaido. When I'm in Tokyo, like there are way too many people. Feels like everyone is walking towards me. It's just like it's not something you'd experience in Canada.
Yeah, very different, very different.
Very
So,
different.
so how does someone make the journey from earning a degree in English literature to becoming an immigration consultant? What was that journey like?
So I was actually after graduating university, I was not doing anything related to my English degree. I was
Hmm.
working at an outdoor store.
Hmm.
Uh, just because I like being outdoor, I just like why not being surrounded by outdoor equipment. So I kind of like that. But I
Hmm.
was working as an assistant manager for a bit, and there's nothing else I can kind of learn. Like there's not really space for me to learn because I kind of knew everything I needed to do there,
Hmm.
and I just thought about like what do I want to do with my life, and I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, so I just went through the list of occupations in Canada, and the immigration kind of stuck to me just because like I came here as an intern student and I experienced some like immigration stuff personally, and also when I was in ESL, people from like Afghanistan or Iraq, they had like such a different culture, they had such a different background. The reason why they're in Canada and the reason why I was in Canada was so different. Their
Hmm.
stories stuck my like head so bad. And I personally met someone. Well, I was a friend with her. I thought she was a good friend of mine, but I didn't really realize that she was a refugee claimant,
Hmm.
and she struggled so much to be in Canada because she didn't really know how long she can stay there just because her application process took really long time, like 3 or 4 years or something like that.
Hmm.
And during such time, her passport was held, and she just could not really move anywhere.
And where
And
was she from? Sorry.
she was from Israel,
Oh, okay, yeah.
but I did not know like she was such a like positive person. And when she finally gave up like her residence in Canada, I just could not do anything, and I just felt so helpless.
Hmm.
And I just wanted to help someone who were in the same situation, but like I didn't know how. And the thing I was just looking at occupation list, like maybe immigration consultant can help
Hmm.
those people in need.
Hmm.
That's when I decided to become an immigration consultant.
And how long ago was that?
That was about 5 years
Hmm.
ago, I think.
Yep. The people that you're helping so far have been mostly coming here on an economic basis. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah, economic or family basis.
Right. Either they're being sponsored by family who are already here, or they can provide evidence that they can invest money to start a business. Am I correct?
Or they have like a good qualification to work in Canada and
Ah,
they're economically independent in Canada, and that's when they can become like immigrant as like economy class. So yeah, those are the people I mainly help right now.
when they're coming to Canada, do you have a sense from them what's appealing to them about Canada? Why are they choosing Canada? What is it about Canada that's drawing them?
I think like one of the most common is options for
Mm,
themselves, options for their families. Like
mm,
sometimes it's like education, sometimes that's career opportunities. Some countries have like a little bit less options for education for their children sometimes,
mm-hmm.
and sometimes their jobs don't pay enough. So when they come to Canada, but same occupation pays more. So they
Right.
have a little bit more options to like financial freedom in a way to do whatever they want compared to their back country, like home country.
I see. And what are the biggest concerns that they have and in terms of needing an immigration consultant? What are the things that they're most concerned about that they want you to help them with?
I think like most of the times, like for economy, like it depends on what they are doing. But economy class, like they're thinking about is it gonna be like successful most of the
Mm,
time? Is it gonna be is my like work experience or is it my education good enough to become a permanent resident? That's
mm,
what most of the time they're concerned about. Because Canada is like immigrating to Canada is becoming more competitive, especially for economy class. Some programs are point based, and when they have a points, they are ranked by their points. The points are based on their education, work experience, language proficiency, and so on.
mm-hmm,
So they're kind of competing each other in a way.
mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
they're kind of concerned, like, oh, is it possible for me to compete against others to stay in Canada?
Right. Right.
And for the families, they are just mostly concerned about whether they can stay together in Canada.
Mm,
That kind of makes sense, right?
absolutely. When you finally get a good outcome, that everything's resolved and they're able to come to Canada, what does that feel like? Do people express their appreciation?
They do, but I always tell them that's your beginning. That's a new chapter. This is not
Mm,
the end, right? So you just become the part of the society and the community, and now you have different things to worry about. Sometimes housing, sometimes the education for the child, right? So they're kind of like happy about the result. At the same time, they're thinking like what should we do now?
mm,
Do I need to
right.
change career? Do I need to go back to school? What my child can do, kind of thing, right?
Right. So one hurdle has been reached, but now there's all these new challenges and new questions they have to face, right?
Right, yeah.
So you've now been in Canada almost as long as you lived in Japan growing up.
Close to, I think so, yeah.
Almost, right?
Yeah.
Almost. So how much does Canada and Calgary in particular feel like home to you now?
I actually feel like pretty comfortable saying Calgary is my second home. Well, I haven't gone back to Japan for 4 years, and it's kind of hard for me to feel like in Japan now too. But having living in Calgary by myself has been kind of like comfortable,
Hmm.
and not being surrounded by someone else is kind of like normal for me. So when
Hmm.
I go back to Japan, like everything is kind of busy, and like distance with my family is feels also closer too. Like house is
Hmm.
not as big in Canada.
Yeah.
So I think I feel pretty comfortable with saying like this is my home.
Yeah.
After like say 2 weeks or so spending in Japan, I feel like I'm like kind of looking forward to coming back to Canada.
Oh wow. Are you planning to go soon for another visit there?
Hopefully, it just depends on like flights are kind of expensive now too, and my work schedule. So it depends on like my schedule and like flight, like how
Right.
expensive it is.
Well, I hope you get to make that trip soon, and I really appreciate the chance to talk to you about why you came to Calgary and how you've made this home away from home for yourself
Yeah,
and how you're helping people. It's wonderful what you're able to do for other new Canadians.
yeah. Thank you.